to the Inspire Wealth podcast with Prof, where we dive into the world of real estate investing and wealth building strategies. I'm your host, Mallory Meehan. I'm a real estate professor, attorney, and seasoned investor here to guide you through the ins and outs of creating wealth through real estate. If you're looking to take your real estate knowledge to the next level, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes and offerings. Welcome to another episode of Inspire Wealth. I am your host, Prof, aka Mallory Meehan, and today I'm joined by Steve Rozenberg. Steve, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Mallory. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, Steve, I know we were talking a little bit before, but why don't you fill our audience in on your background and where your path has taken you to get into real estate?
Sure. So my background, I live in Houston, Texas, from Southern California originally. And my path is it's probably similar to a lot of people that are watching this and probably a little bit different in the sense that my background is I started off as an airline pilot. Blue collar family, was told, hey, if you want something, you got to go get it. And I did. And I worked very, very hard as a youth. I got hired as an airline pilot at 25 years old. I was the second youngest person hired by a major airline, of this particular airline. And I had a great job. I had the job of my dreams. I was flying all over the world, 25 years old. And it was the life that I had hoped I would have. And everyone, told me that, hey, you are set for life. Mm-hmm. And then a certain day in history happened, and that day was 9/11. And actually 2 days after 9/11, I was standing in the chief pilot's office getting furloughed. And my paycheck, as I knew it, was gone. My identity as a pilot was gone. And I remember after being escorted out of the building, standing there thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do? Like, what now?
Yeah.
And it's probably familiar to people that are watching this, where things are happening around you, even though you didn't cause it to happen, everything's crumbling and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And it is affecting your life. Mm-hmm. And that was me. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know how to start a business. Like, I don't know anything about real estate. I don't know any of that stuff. That's not what I do. Like, I'm a pilot. And the belief that I had was, it was keeping me stuck, because my belief was, I fly a plane. That's what I do. And it was kind of saying, like, Steve, like, you don't deserve that life that you see other people having. That's not for you. You need to stay in your lane as an employee, as a pilot, do your job. You're going to get furloughed, and that's your life. And the problem was, that was a dangerous belief that I had, because it told me that if anything ever happened again, I was going to be right back standing escorted outside of another building.
Right.
And the identity that I was clinging to as a person was, I was a pilot. I flew my lines. I had a route. I got a steady paycheck. That's what I did. Mm-hmm. And for your audience, and I know some of these people are getting involved in real estate, the challenge is when I was no longer a pilot, standing there without a job, and I thought to myself, if I'm not that person anymore, then who am I?
Right.
And, I will tell you, and I don't know if you or anyone has ever been in this situation, but that's when fear starts creeping into your head. And that fear was telling me, you're nobody. You're not going to succeed. You're going to fail even if you try. Stay in your lane. And I kind of had to make a decision at that point. And the decision is either I keep living that life, or I kill that life off and I step into a new identity. Mm-hmm. And I made that decision. I said, you know what? I deserve a better life. I deserve what I see other people having. I deserve to own real estate. I deserve, and I'm going to make it happen. And I made that decision, a conscious decision, to say, I can build a business. I can control my destiny. I can control my life, and I can have the life that I want. And that decision changed everything. And instead of me asking, what if I fail? I started asking a different question. I started asking myself, what if I actually can succeed? Mm-hmm. Like, what if I can make this work? Now, that identity that I stepped into was, I can do this. Like I stopped believing the lie that people told me. Like a lot of these people probably watching the show are probably, they believe a lie that society tells them. And I did too. And that lie was that I'm just a pilot. I can't do anything else. But that wasn't true. I had the discipline, I had the focus, I had the knowledge to do anything I wanted to own real estate. And I stepped into that role. So I started reading books. I read a book a week. I had to go to this building with books in it called a library. They probably don't. I don't know if people go to them now, but they existed. This is in 2002. So YouTube and Facebook, none of this existed.
Mhm.
And I got a book a week, and I just kept reading, and I wanted to see, what do people do that control their life that are wealthy, and everything led back to real estate. I didn't know anything about real estate, but I'm like, this makes sense. So I started learning real estate. I bought courses, and I thought back in my mind when I wanted to be a pilot. Yes, I read books. Yes, I watched videos, but that still didn't make me a pilot because I had to get a flight instructor to go up in the sky with me to teach me how to fly a plane.
Mhm.
So I thought back when I was trying to become a real estate investor, I thought, okay, I'm reading books, I'm watching videos, but I need someone to actually show me the implementation of this. So I started looking up online, like, does this exist? And sure enough, there was real estate coaches. So I called this guy, and he said, Steve, if you do what I say, I can make you very successful. And I'm like, well, I just gave you $10,000 that I don't have. I have no more money. I'm being resourceful. I'm all in. And he says, we'll see. So 30 days later, I'm sitting at a closing table doing what's called a double escrow close, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I have no idea what's going on. I have a phone at the title company, and it's the block phones, and I'm passing it to the title company, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to jail. Like this cannot be like someone is going to crash in, the FBI, and they're going to say airline pilot involved in a sting, and all this stuff is going on. And next thing you know, they everyone shakes hands and they start cutting checks, and I walk out with a check for $20,000, and I'm like, okay, when I walk out, this is when they're going to swarm me. Like this is,
Right.
and nothing happened. And I'm like, wow. I call the guy up, and I'm like, this is amazing. I can't believe this worked. And he goes, Steve, I told you. And I'm like, I know, but I didn't think it was real. And he goes, it works every time. He goes, it's a recipe. He goes, the recipes work if you follow the recipe. And I said, you must make people very wealthy. And he goes, believe it or not, Steve, sadly, you're one of the few people that gets it across the goal line. I go, but I just met you 30 days ago. And I told you said, do what I told you. And I did. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's that. He goes, exactly. And I go, but why don't they listen? And he goes, Steve, he goes, if you can figure that out, you and I will both be very wealthy people. He goes, people do not do. So so anyways, as I stepped into this new identity, I eventually got a job back with the airline, but I kept down this path. I was never going to put myself in a position to allow a paycheck to dictate my life and my future.
Mhm.
So I started buying real estate. My business partner and I, we started a property management company to handle our properties. And then we started marching, and we started growing very aggressively. And we, at one point, were the fastest growing property management company in the state of Texas. We scaled to over 1,000 properties. But what we did is we ran the company the way airlines run. So this is totally different. A lot of people fly on an airline, but they don't ever think about the structure of what happens when an airline is actually operating, whether it's maintenance, ground handlers, fuelers, flight attendants, baggage handlers. There's this dance that's going on
Mhm.
every second of the day, everywhere in the world. It's a system. And you don't have to be the smartest person in the world to fuel a plane in Rio de Janeiro, but yet planes don't crash because of fuel.
Mhm.
So you've got to imagine it's the system that makes the airlines run. And so the systems catch the mistakes. And I was thinking, like, why can't I run my business this way? And the answer was, you can. Just like many people watching they probably have jobs. Let's face it. They don't own a business. The business is running them. We all know that. And I was taught, if you cannot walk away from what you do for 3 hours, 3 days, or 3 weeks, and have it keep running without you, you don't own a business, you own a job. And when I say a business, real estate is a business. The biggest challenge real estate investors have, I believe, is they don't identify as it being a business. You have income, you have expenses, you have a lot of laws, rules, regulations, and you have a living, breathing person inside of that property. And that person has rights. And if you do not abide by their rights, someone will come knocking to let you know you have made a mistake. And when you're standing in front of the judge, is not the time to start wondering what you did wrong because you didn't treat it like a business.
Mhm.
So we scaled that company. I sold the company to a big venture capital firm that had 10,000 properties. I started working for them. And then since then, I've been going around, I speak and I show people how to grow what they're doing, whether it's real estate or business, how to think like a business owner, to step into that new identity, to become the person they need to become and create the processes, structures, and procedures to make their business truly run without them and grow. That's my bio. How's that?
I love it. I love it. And so Steve, this is one I find your story so fascinating and so interesting, yet it's so simplistic and it's very to the point. If you follow what you need to do, you'll be successful.
Yeah,
And I think to your point, one of those biggest hurdles that people have is that mindset, is just
correct.
being able to change the mindset to say, okay, if I step away from my job, I don't have that security. I don't have that paycheck. I don't have the insurance coverage. I don't have, the retirement benefits. And, that's the biggest problem in where we are as a society now, is that people can't break the mold. And so one thing that I think would be really cool is if let's do a case study. And so let's walk through, and Steve, um, let's assume I'm a high income earner, a
Okay.
professional.
Okay.
I make good money at what I'm doing, but I live paycheck to paycheck. And, I want to break out of that mold. Now, I love what I do, so I don't want to leave my job, which is a lot of what people do.
Sure.
But I want to find something that if I did want to take a 3-week vacation, if I did want to go away, I have the ability to do that. So if I'm coming to you and I'm saying, Steve, here's the situation. I make a lot of money, but I, I'm not really seeing that money make money for me.
Sure.
What can I do?
Okay. Wow, this is a good one. All right. I've never been asked this before. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I think is important to discuss is when you talked about mindset, I think mindset is everything. I think number one, many people, they go from an employee mentality of having a job and they think that they are going to change their environment of being a business owner, but they are not changing. So they're taking an employee mindset and saying, I'm now a business owner, but I think like an employee. So that it's like taking an Android app and trying to shove it into an Apple phone and you're wondering why it's not working. So
Right.
when you become a business owner, you have to become a business owner mentally. It's kind of like if you're going to go to sleep, you've got to act like you're asleep before you fall asleep. Many people say like, oh, well, when I build a successful business, then I'll be the business owner. It doesn't work that way. So you have to become that person mentally first. So that's the first thing is and sadly, as we all know, school is basically taught to teach people to become employees, not to become entrepreneurs. So we're at a disadvantage already. Many times when people are trying to become a business owner, they're just running away from a life they don't want, but they've never actually wondered what they're running towards. So
Right.
they're running away from one fire, they're running towards another fire, and they go right back into that fire. And they're like, kind of in the same place, but now I'm making no money because I'm spending all of my time and I don't know how to run a business because I never really thought about it. So I think pre-framing and pre-planning is important. As I said, I'm an airline pilot
Mhm.
and we talked about this. Let's just take this more simple. If you were going to go and drive to a destination in your car, what would you use? Like
Google Maps.
you'd
Wait.
use Google Maps. Thank
Right.
you. Google Maps needs two things to work. It needs a starting point, and what else does it need?
The destination.
It needs a destination. If you don't put a destination in Google Maps, can it give you directions?
No.
No. It's going to go like, you're like, hey, Google, get me there. And it's going, okay, where are you going? Well, I don't know. I just got a good gut feeling. I just want to get away from home. Okay,
Yeah.
but where are you going? Like, we would never get in our car and just start driving
Mhm.
and assume that Google's going to figure it out. And if you pulled over and asked someone for directions, I would go, okay, well, where are you going? I don't really know, Steve. I'm just busy. I'm just running away from home. Well, then I can't give you directions because I don't know where you're going.
Right.
So the first thing is you have to know.
Mhm.
Now, if we can agree that when you own real estate is just, let me say this first. Real estate is just a tactic, right? So what I mean by that is, you're a business owner. A subsection of that is real estate, and a subsection of that is what you do: long term, short term, flipping, burr, whatever acronym flavor of the day is right now. But at the end of the day, you are a business owner. Many people, when I talk to, I say, what do you do? And they go, well, I'm a flipper. No. You're a business owner. Subsection of that is business, and a subsection of that, the tactic you are using is flipping. And the
Mhm.
reason I think this is important for this conversation is we have to identify as business owners first. And if we own a business, many times, like I coach hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, right? I mean, it's been into the thousands at this point. The one thing, and they're all different walks: business, roofers, attorneys, CPAs, chefs. When I get everyone in the same room, the beauty of this is we're all entrepreneurs trying to just have a better life. That's it. We just want to have a better life. The mechanism or the thing that we're utilizing, roofing, real estate, sales, attorney, that's what we are using to get us that better life.
Mhm.
That is not the life we want to have, but we identify as I am this. No. That is just the tool. It's like saying I'm a shovel. No, you're got a shovel to dig a hole to plant a tree because you want shade. What's the result of the shovel? So if we can identify and agree that we are a business and we are a business owner, okay, based on being a business owner, what we have to then ask ourselves is, what is the destination of our business? And I ask, what is the sale date of their business? Now, this is important. And I think it's important that people understand sometimes we listen to talk and sometimes we listen to learn. Most of us listen to talk and they just want to rebuttal. They're just waiting to say what they want to say. The reason I say you have to have a sale date is not to sell it. The reason you have to have a sale date is if you are going to have a saleable asset, it has to be running on systems, processes, and procedures, and not you. Because if not, you own a job, you don't own a business.
Mhm.
And it has to have a date. And that's going to have to be a day, a month, and a year. So if I was, let's just say we're using real estate as this analogy, and I would say, okay, what is the destination? What is the sale date? Doesn't mean you have to sell it, but it is a saleable asset. You could, or it could run on its own and just give you cash flow. So you say, okay, June 1st, 2029, I have a $50 million portfolio giving me a 35% profit margin, and I'm involved 3 hours a week. Now we have a destination. Everything we do is predicated on reverse engineering from that destination backwards. You have a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year plan, and everything is predicated on that. As you know, our brains work in 90-day cycles. So you take that 1 year and you break them down into quarters. That's why there's 4 quarters in a year. They're 90 days.
Mhm.
Everything is predicated on that North Star. Everything is predicated on that date. Because if you don't have a date, it goes into the someday file, which never happens.
Mhm.
And everything is, so when people say like, hey, Steve, should I buy this property? Explain to me how this is going to get you to the goal. Well, I don't have a goal. Well, then maybe you should get the goal before you get on the highway and start driving, because I can't tell you if this is going to get you further, closer, or further away from your goal if you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, as you grow your portfolio, you are going to, a business is made up of leverage. That leverage is called employees. And whether they're virtual assistants, physical, it doesn't matter. Everybody needs to know, boss, what is the vision? Where are we going? And if you're like, I don't know, we're just fucking busy and you just got to pick up a shovel and just start digging, at some point they're going to go, this person has no idea what they're doing. I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's, I get a lot of owners that say like, they have no idea. This person has no idea all I'm doing. I'm like, well, have you ever told them? Well, no, it's not their business to know. Well, that's probably why they left, because they're just shoveling along. They want to, we want visions to believe in. That's why we watch football, sports, we wear jerseys. That's why we join religions. That's why we join the military. That's why we join gangs, motorcycle clubs, because we want to be a part of something bigger than us. We want to believe in something. And if you, as the business owner, do not give your employees something to believe in, then they're there for a paycheck, which means they will leave for another paycheck. So I know a lot of people may not have employees, but you've got to start it with the end in mind and build it that way. One of the things I always tell people when I do these events in Houston, education of helping business owners and real estate investors, you should have a starting point and your sale date. Based on that, you should have an organization chart for what the company looks like today. And then you should have an organization chart of what does this company look like when we are a $50 million company? Because now you can show someone, hey, this is where we're going. This is the destination. And 85% of how we learn is through our eyes. I could tell you, hey, Mallory, I'm going to build this $50 million company and you're going to go up the ladder. That only 15% do you believe. But when you see it, you're going to go, okay, I see it. A picture's worth 1,000 words. When you see the org chart and go, okay, now I see how I'm going to grow with you. I believe in the vision because I can see it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going back. A lot of people, real estate is 4 walls and a roof. That's all it is. I have owned many, many houses that I ran that 4 walls and a roof incorrectly. And I sold it to someone else and they ran it good and made money. And I'm like, how did you take that one crappy property and you turned it into success when I couldn't make money? And they're like, you were running the wrong business model in it. It's not that type of business. It's like trying to take water skis and go up to the slopes and try to snow ski with them. Mm-hmm. And so I learned a lot that the business model inside of the 4 walls and the roof will give you the goal as long as you know what the goal is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think a lot of people are going to say, okay, Steve, how do I determine what my goal should be? Or you say, have a sale date. Now, when you're asking somebody for a sale date, are you asking them a question like, do you have a point in time that you want to be making so much money? Do you have a point in time that maybe you want to be retired and be able to travel more? Or what kind of things go into that sale date to help them with that mindset switch?
That's a great question. And obviously everyone is different, right? It's like fingerprints. Everyone has a different one. Yeah. So I think that we have to understand, if somebody is buying property because they want the cash flow, that is different than someone who's playing appreciation. So I could be wrong, but I'll just give you my perspective of my layman's terms of real estate. I've always been taught that you buy real estate for 5 reasons. First reason is cash flow, which is the delta between income and expenses. The second is equity capture. The third is debt pay down. Then you have depreciation, and then you have appreciation. So of those, again, you're smarter than me. You may have a different analogy, but I'll just use the 5. So okay. when I'm coaching people and I ask them, okay, pretty much depreciation is going to happen no matter what. That's something that's afforded to you by the IRS. You're getting that. Debt pay down over 30 years. Let's just say this is a 30-year run. 30-year run, debt pay down is going to happen, right? Eventually, you're going to figure out how to be a good landlord and you're going to get a tenant in there, and that tenant is going to pay that debt down to 0. So that leaves 3 things. It leaves equity capture. It leaves
cash flow.
Thank you. And appreciation. So I said, okay, if you could pick one, which one is the most important, the non-negotiable, based on where you want to go, based on what you want your life to be? And they go, well, Steve, I don't have a job, so cash flow is important. Okay, then that is the non-negotiable that we are looking for when we are looking at a deal. It's got to have cash flow. What is the cash flow per deal? Well, then we start going, okay, I start looking at some other metrics of, I did a thing with Bigger Pockets where I coached a guy. He bought his first out-of-state investment property. He was in the military. And we went through this exercise, and he wanted the properties to be cash flowing when he retired from the military. So it's like, okay, so a lot of times we think cash flow is what we want. But I'm like, well, so what do you do for a living? And they're like, oh, I'm a doctor. I'm like, okay, so you're a doctor. Does $200 make or break your life? No. Mm-hmm. So it's an ego. So it's your ego that wants the $200. Because if you had the choice between appreciation, cash flow, and equity capture, appreciation is always going to be the monster. That's the silent monster, in my opinion. And so cash flow is our ego. We want to say, I've got all these properties, I got this much coming in. But if you have a job, why don't you it's like you planted a seed in the ground because you wanted to have a treehouse when your grandkids grow up and they can play in it. You plant the seed in the ground, it goes for about 2 weeks, and then you put this big building on it, and you're like, that didn't work because you didn't let it mature. So a lot of times we make a buying decision today on a future investment results that we want 20 years from now. So if I'm talking to someone who's 70 years old, they may want the cash flow. If I'm talking to someone who's in their 20s, well, then maybe you need to let the compound value of money do its magic. God forbid, get a job, earn an income, let it mature, let it grow. And so a lot of times we want it now, but we don't understand the value of letting this sit. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I think it's just so important to understand where are we going and reverse engineer it with those 5 principles.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100%. People need to understand exactly what they're looking to add to maybe their life now and what they want to see their life in 5, 10, 20 years.
Yes, 100%.
So, Steve, I'm curious when you're coaching and you've helped identify exactly what that start date is or sale date is, and you've helped them create these processes, procedures, and systems. Now, how do you help them from their first acquisition to then being able to scale and being able to replicate the process in a way that isn't going to be overburdensome, but also isn't waiting on deals that potentially are there in front of them.
Yeah. So first of all, the first thing we have to do is we have to define what is a deal, right?
Mhm.
Everyone has a different definition. So if they can't tell me, like if I ask someone like Mallory, what's your last name?
Meehan,
Okay, what city do you live in?
State College.
Okay. As quickly as you responded to those answers, that's how quickly you should tell me what is a deal for you. That's got to be in your subconscious that you can spit it out that quickly. When I ask someone, what is the sale date? What is your deal? And they stutter and they stalter, I know they don't know. So I'm like, I can't help you until you know. It's got to be that clear. It's got to be that thing that you're always thinking about. So number one, we've got to figure out what is a deal. We have to identify that. They call it a buy box, whatever people call it, but we have to identify that deal. The second thing is it's in your head. Like we have the systems in our head. We've got to get it out of our head. Nowadays with, a lot of times, I think AI is great, right? AI is obviously, it's not going anywhere. It's amazing. But we also need human interaction. And I'm a big believer that a business is made up of leverage. That leverage is called employees. I believe you systemize it, you automate it, and you outsource it. Outsource it to a person in office or to a virtual assistant. When we scaled our company, 60% of our company, 25 of our employees were in Mexico as virtual assistants because we were very, very good at right person, right seat, and we documented everything. So we've got to make, a business, we'll go off of a business. A business is made up of 3 parts: monetization, systemization, and duplication.
Mhm.
So monetization is sales and marketing. That's like the way you and I need oxygen to breathe. Your business needs money to operate, and a rental business as well. Systemization is making the business run without you, just the way the airlines run, running on systems, processes, and procedures. The key to success is duplication.
Mhm.
And this is what I show people. You have to duplicate yourself. We have to document it. We have to do what's called the SOP, standard operating procedures, and we have to scale it. And you've got to create training modules. You have to duplicate yourself. And the sooner you could do that, what gets written gets retained. So we've got to create processes to get out of your head, to get into a documentation process, to be able to scale and grow. So going back to your question, it's the biggest challenge that people have is they don't know what a deal is. That honestly, I hate to say it, but that's when I'm like, okay, well, what's a deal? Well, it's just no, there's no wells. It's real estate is math. It is all numbers. There's no emotions. It should be data and metrics. It's got to have this much ROI. It's got to have this much cash on cash. If they don't know those things, I'm like, this is where you get hurt. This is where you're going to get in trouble because you're not running it like a business.
So when you're talking to them and you're looking at the returns as, kind of what do you define as a deal? Do you look at anything else beyond that? Do you look at, are they trying to be active investors, passive investors? How much time do they have to dedicate to these processes, systems, and procedures? Do they have a specific market in mind? Like, give me more on like
Yeah,
where you're trying to help them really identify what a deal is for them specifically.
sure. And again, I can just tell you how I do it. It's not doesn't have to be the gospel, but the first thing I look at is based on their goals of what they want, right? Um, then I say, okay, let's say someone's looking for appreciation. Okay. Then what I do is I go, okay, let's just take this. Are we operating just in the US or are we going outside of the US? Because I've done business in Australia. Sometimes we are the limiting factor. We're like, oh, I never thought of owning property in Australia. It's like, well, people rent there. Yeah, I
Right.
just never thought about it. Like a lot of people from out of this country buy here.
Mhm.
So why can't we buy there? Like we don't think about that. So that's our limiting belief, right? That's our own challenge. So I say, okay, let's just say the US is where we're going to go. The first thing I want to know is, okay, if we were going to take every major metropolitan city in the US, which one is growing, which one is shrinking? Number one. If we're going to market, we need to market to a hungry crowd. So which one? A hungry crowd needs people need places to live. Next, we say, okay, these are growing. Okay, great. Now, next question is which ones are landlord friendly states and which ones are tenant friendly states?
Yep.
Because I want to. I'm not going to swim in a pond if I can swim in the ocean. I want to swim with what's most favorable to me. So I'm going to look for specific landlord friendly states. Now I'm starting to superimpose things. Okay, so I've got these, they're landlord friendly states and they're growing. Okay. Are there secondary or tertiary markets that are coming outside of the aspects that business is growing and it's heading in that direction? I look at three main drivers when I'm looking at a city. I want to see three main drivers of that economy. If it's an all military town, that scares me because if they deploy or they shut the base down, you're screwed. If it's all tourism and you have another COVID, that hurts, right? And it's seasonal, right? It's cyclical. So I like to see three economic drivers of that city. So it's a growing city, it's a landlord friendly city, and there's three economic drivers. Next thing is I want to see what is the price point of these houses. You could look at let's just say LA is probably not the right example because it doesn't fit all those, but let's just say LA is the number. We go, yeah, but I gotta spend $1 million on a property. Oh, how much do you have to spend? I was thinking like 250. Okay, well now we got to go. Okay, landlord friendly, growing, metropolitan city, 250 on the average. So now we're starting to weed out those. Next
Right.
thing I do is I say, okay, which one of these has the ratio of what rent is and what the housing price or the mortgage would be? So, if you're in a college town, like I'll take Austin as an example, Austin, Texas, houses are very, very expensive. It doesn't make sense to have a rental property in Austin, Texas, because you're going to be what's called negative geared. It's going to go up in value, but it's not going to go up you're not going to make any cash flow. You'll make it in the long run if you can sustain the losses.
Right.
So it's a good strategy based on a certain tactic of what you're doing long term, and you can withhold that. Then what I want to know is what is the average age, right? What is he? So are they in their 80s and 90s, like in Florida, where it's going to be a higher turnover? Are they super young and they're in college and it's going to be high turnover? What is the demographics? What does it make up of the tenants, right? Then I start going a little bit more micro, and all this is public data. You can get very granular saying, okay, what are the crime rates? What are the schools? What are the school ratings, right? What is the average income of the renters? So let's say I'm getting this nailed down. I'm like, hey, I found Brownsville, Texas. Everything works, but all the tenants are undocumented and they only make $500 a month on paper. Oh, that's probably not going to work for a $1,500 rental.
Mhm.
So what you're doing is you're starting with a big pot, I guess is where I'm going with this, and you're weeding out based on metrics that you've determined. So some people say like, oh, this is a good property. I'm like, tell me why. And they're like, well, it rents for this much. I'm like, that means nothing. That's like one piece of a very, very long string of data that is telling you the story, but it's all got to be based on what? It's got to be based on the goal of your business.
100%. I think that's great advice. And so let's say somebody is looking at some of these markets and they're, they've identified a price point. Maybe it's what they have saved up and they plan on putting 20% down and financing. Do you find there are any other challenges that people have in actively pulling the trigger and not just continuing to go through and analyze these deals and kind of do that analysis by paralysis model, and they just never fully commit?
Yeah, 100%. And this goes back to two things. Number one, it goes back to mindset of fear of loss.
Yep.
And not looking at it. We tend to identify money with an emotional string, right? And money is a they print money all the time. Money is just, it's like if we were trading rocks, we probably would not think of the same as money, but we put this emotional tie to money. And we're afraid of making a mistake because we think of money as our IQ. And if we lose money, we think we're dumb, which has nothing, there's no correlation. It's the story we tell ourselves.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, I'm like, have you ever in the last 12 months overpaid for something that you just wanted? Of course we have. Do you think in the next 12 months, you're going to overpay for something that you really just want? Maybe it's whether it's a food, whether it's lipstick, whatever it is, you're probably going to overpay because you want it.
Right.
Yes. Okay. How is this any different? You are going to overpay depending on the goals. I'm not saying you're going to overpay. Is there a chance you could make a mistake? Absolutely. 100%. Like I guarantee you, you probably will make a mistake. That I can guarantee you. Now, based on that, you've got to, I don't know if you're familiar with disc profiling. So disc profiling is personality profiling. For those of you that watching that don't know, you have a D, you have an I, you have an S, and you have a C, different types of people. Do you know what investors are do you know what disc the average investor is?
I don't.
They're C's because it's math, because real estate is data. A plus B equals C. It's logical. They're not emotional. They're not D's because those are people that like impulsive actions like stock markets. They're not S's because they're too emotional. They'd never let people out of the house because they'd feel bad for them. So they're C's. It's logic. It's math. So my point is you've got to understand, how does a C think? A C thinks in numbers. They look in data. They've got to understand that this is an investment based on mathematics, not on emotions. So you've got to understand when an investor's not pulling the trigger, it's because mathematically, for some reason, it's not making sense to them. So there's a disconnect in the logic. It's not emotions. C's are not emotional.
Right.
They're logical. And so we've got to figure out what is the logic that is there. There's a, it's kind of like, and I teach sales and I tell people all the time, let's talk about sales. If somebody has a problem, right? Somebody contacts you because they have a problem, right? Let's just say your house. And you have a solution, meaning you want to buy that house. And you have a conversation and they don't buy. It's because of you. It's because you did not solve their problem. There's something you said or didn't say that caused them to go, yeah, I don't think so. So there's a disconnect somewhere, and we've got to understand what that disconnect. So the reason people are not pulling the trigger is there's a disconnect somewhere that they're not logically connecting the dots. Most real estate investors, I can tell you, I've dealt with thousands of them. Majority of them are C's because investing in real estate is logical.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
No, I think that was great. And so I think that when people are trying to pull the trigger and move forward, sometimes there's always fear. People always have that, I would rather not lose than gain. And that mindset too is one of those like really challenging things.
Yeah.
So if somebody were to want to employ you as their coach, Steve, or join one of your mindsets, how would they go about doing that?
Well, they can look me up online, steverozenberg.com, rozenberg.com. You can find me on any social media channel. And the one thing I'll say is you've got to ask yourself, it's not what it will cost you to invest in yourself. The question is what does it cost you so far to not invest in yourself? Because listen, it change is hard, right? It's painful. Yeah. It's painful to win, right? There's a lot of pain when you win. It's painful to lose. Pick your pain. Which pain do you want? Right. You're going to get pain either way. And so a lot of times what I've learned, a lot of people, and this is business owners and investors, what they do is They think about a problem for months and months and months. It takes a second to make a decision. And once you make that decision and you go all in on the decision, it's very fast. But we will think and ponder and pontificate on all these reasons when it just takes a second to decide. And we don't do that. And so I tell people, if you've had pain, let's say for the last 5 years of some financial, mental, emotional, business, you've had some pain. If you don't want another 5 years of the same pain, you have to change.
Right.
So you have to change to change. And so it sounds so simple, but the reality is many of us don't change. Yeah. We do the same thing. Like, listen, it's been a new presidential election. There's a new economy. There's a new era. Everything is new except us. We haven't changed. And we don't change, but we're expecting to have a great year. Everything around us has changed. The economy has changed, the tactics, but we're still using a tactic from the old COVID. And we're wondering why it's not working. It's because we have not changed. And if you don't change, it'll happen, but it'll be the pain of loss will be the pain.
Right. No, I think that's awesome advice. Steve, I'll make sure to put your usernames for your social media under the notes and have people reach out if they have any questions. One last thing though, Steve, I am curious because you had said you'd gone to the library and were reading a book every single week. Is there any specific book or resource that over the years you have found to be one of those, like, if somebody wants to get into real estate, they should read this?
Well, I wrote a book.
Okay, well, great. What's the book called?
It's called Building an Empire, Failing Our Way to Millions, is the book. And it's my story of pretty much of I gave you I gave you the highlights, right? This is the dark side of all the things that went wrong as we built our company, right? Which everyone has. And I talk a lot about my failures. And these are real life, no shit failures. Listen, I think that we can learn the tactics, right? Tactics change over time. So whether it's buying apartments or self-storage or syndications or parking lots, those are all tactics. I think understanding the strategy, right? I actually, one of the best books I read, like them, love them, or hate them, Grant Cardone's 10X was a great book for me because it just got me to think bigger. And it just made me start thinking like, what if? What if this guy's right?
Right.
What if I did think bigger and it actually changed my life? And like I said, you can infer whatever you want from the person, but the fact that we need to think bigger, we need to think on the positive. And listen, there's the standards, rich dad, poor dad, all those are, and I've spoken on stages with all these guys, good guys. They're all just normal people. They all just have different educations and different backgrounds and different things. But I would say 10X and another book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. The Compound Effect is a great book because it talks about just 3 degrees of difference every day. Doing one thing different every day compounds over time. It'll change your life. And I think sometimes we need to learn more about the compound effect. It's not these huge swings one way or the other. And it's just, listen, one thing I will say is every day that we wake up, we have a simple decision to make. And that simple decision is I'm going to be a better version or I'm going to be a worse version of the person I was yesterday. That's it. And that's it. Like, I don't care if you're young, old, rich, broke, fat, skinny, it doesn't matter. We are all equal when we open our eyes. And we get 86,400 seconds that we don't get to carry over from the day before. So we go, okay, I got a clean slate today. Everyone else has a clean slate. How am I going to handle this day? Am I going to, like I talk to people, they're like, I'm going to war. I'm taking down this deal. I'm like, why would you say that? Like that is like, why would you have that mindset? How about I want to live a better life? I want to enjoy today. I want to embrace it. I want to, that's just me. But my point is how we do the little things is how we do everything. And these books have taught me successful people, they really focus on doing the good things and doing the good things repetitively, the same habits, the same patterns. Yeah, I tell people all the time, when you tell me and you fight tooth and nail to keep your limiting beliefs, I'm going to let you keep them. Steve, I can't do this. Steve, I can't do that. I'm going to sit there and say, you know what? Nobody cares. It doesn't change my life. If that's what you want to believe, I'm going to let you believe it. Good luck. Because I'm not going to fight you on it. And so they're like, oh, you're like, that's not my job. My job is not to convince you. It's kind of like being a trainer at the gym. I'm not going to go pick you up from your house, drive you to the gym and lift the weights for you. At some point, you got to drive to the gym and show up. And
Right.
I think a lot of times we don't understand the role of someone who's a coach or a mentor. I'm not here to do it for you. I'm here to take you from third gear to seventh gear by getting your head right and focusing on that goal that you want to get to and kind of saying, hey, you agree? I agree. Let's go. And that's what I think a good coach does is they accelerate you. They don't carry you.
Hmm. No, I think that's great advice. So Steve, we are just about at time. I appreciate you joining us on the show. And like I said, I'll make sure to post all of your taglines and your book and everything. So again, thank you for being on the Inspire Wealth podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mallory.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for today. Until next time, Prof M out. And for those who want a more hands-on learning experience, check out our online courses at inspirewealtheducation.com. Whether you're just starting out or looking to expand your investment portfolio, I've created step-by-step guides and resources to help you achieve your financial goals. So hit that subscribe button and let's start building your wealth one episode at a time.